I'm Robert Brunner. I'm an industrial designer. I have a studio here in San Francisco called Ammunition. We've been together for about 8 years, and through that time, we've spent most of our time doing connected things. And over the last 3 or 4 years, really looking at, moving things into the consumer market, into our lives, into our homes that have new functionality. And so when I started putting this together, I always like a quote, and I went back to my old friend Don Norman's book, Design of Everyday Things, originally written in 1969, and found this one. Design of everyday things is in great danger of becoming the design of superfluous, overloaded, unnecessary things. At that time, Don was, talking about knives and forks and analog blenders and things like that. But it's very interesting where we are today, and we're looking at things that were well established, things that I thought were done, right? But through this lens of connectivity and intelligence, and bringing them back to consumers. But it's not all good. Some of it's great, some of it's not, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So I've shown this slide before, and if you've ever seen me talk, you've probably seen this, but here's 3 things, right, that we all know well. Toaster, the tea kettle, and the doorbell. We know what they do. We understand their human interface inherently. They hold emotional places in our lives. It's part of our daily living. But we're going back and rethinking these, right? So here are 3 examples I found of new versions of those common items. The jammy toaster, which I think is a concept, but apparently you put your bread in, and as it toasted, it burns today's weather, your local weather, into the bread. And while you're eating breakfast, if it's sunny outside or not. The iKettle, which is basically an electric kettle, but you can set it on your phone. It gives you an alert, et cetera, et cetera. And then the Sky Bell, which integrates a camera into the doorbell, so when someone rings the doorbell, you can look on your phone and see who it is. So these range from silly to yeah, that's useful, right? But this is the kind of thing we're seeing. People coming into our studio constantly, with tons of funding, with a whole variety of ideas, but not really sort of thinking about how they fit in people's lives, what they do, and whether people actually need them. So I've got a couple projects we've done recently I'll go through quickly, and then some of the learnings that we've gained along the way. So the first is for a startup company called Leo, which we've been very involved with from the beginning. And Leo is an interesting story. But what we ended up doing with the first product is we rethought this. The humble nightlight, right? And it didn't start out to be a nightlight, but it ended up being in that form factor, and there's reasons I'll tell you why. Where it started, though, was with this. This is a very sophisticated emergency robot done by Robotex, one of the founders, Adam Gettings of Leo. But what Adam realized, these are very high sensing capabilities, robots, in terms of environmental, visual. Whenever they go to an environment, they know what exactly is going on and so forth. He realized those sensor costs were coming down, and through a personal experience of a friend's home burning down, realized that if more homes had some of this technology, they could be safer and more comfortable, et cetera. So that was the beginning of Leo, which, as we developed it and developed this first product, we ended up looking at this very common thing in our homes and rethinking it.
This is what's supposed to keep your home safe from fire. If you're nearby, you'll hear it. But what if you aren't nearby? What happens then? Smoke detectors aren't smart. They don't know when you're there and when you're not. And they certainly won't alert you if you're not home. All they do is beep. But now, there's a simple and easy way to make your smoke alarm smarter. Leo's Smart Alert Nightlight. Leo's a simple device. Plug it in and let it go to work. Leo monitors your smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. If they go off, Leo hears and alerts you immediately. So you can listen in, wherever you are, and connect to the fire department. And if for some reason you don't respond, Leo will contact your friends and neighbors as well. With Leo, you can rest easy. You know your home is safe, whether you're there or not. And that means everything.
So that's a Leo Smart Alert nightlight. Now, when I said we didn't start out thinking to remake a nightlight. We actually were looking at how we first bring this sensing technology into the home, and we're trying to find a form factor and a place in the house where it can go and be simply understood, and we came upon the idea of a nightlight. A nightlight is a common thing. It usually ends up in central locations, hallways, things like that. And it also metaphorically has this sort of comfort and safety, feelings about it. And so what we did was we actually ended up developing the world's most expensive nightlight. But it's $99. It's not that bad, but compared to $4.99 nightlights. But again, what the idea here is it listens, it understands what it hears, and in particular CO2 and fire alarms. If one happens, it notifies you, lets you know what it heard. If you're not there, you've set up a list of your neighbors or family, and it contacts them and lets them know. So it just brings this added level of comfort. But what I really love about it is it uses an existing infrastructure in your home, sound, and existing things that you have in your home, smoke and CO2 detectors, and makes them smarter. As you saw through the app, you can tell what's going on, it'll play what's going on in your home and so forth. And actually, next generations, we're going to expand it to beyond just smoke and CO2 to other types of alarms and intruders and so forth. So again, it just becomes this pair of ears in your home. But we had to make it the world's best nightlight, right? So you can pick from 16 million colors to pick the particular hue on your nightlight that you do like. Actually, this is my kitchen. I like this particular blue. It's just, and actually, what we found is people actually love that as much as the protection idea. So, but this is really a platform, and what we're doing with Leo going forward is looking at how we bring this sensing technology into terms of comfort and convenience and safety. So here's a connected humidifier, a space heater that understands what's going on in the rest of your house, and you can deal with remotely. Same with air purifier, ceiling fan that integrates with your HVAC again to help cool and warm your home appropriately. Even getting into lighting rather, that tells you a bit about what's going on, knows what time it is, sets moods, et cetera, et cetera. But again, this is a concept, when we start talking about this idea of everyday things, I mean, a security camera is not an everyday thing, right? It's plastered on your wall. What does it say? So we've been thinking, okay, what can we integrate this into? So this is an example of a clock with a security camera in, so you can hang it on the wall and it doesn't look like you're being watched all the time, even though you are, right? So the next project I'm going to go into is one you may have seen recently. It was just recently announced, the June oven. I think all of us, to some degree or another, cook. If you're from my generation, you remember these three guys. Here they are making their attempt at cooking, and some of you may feel like this. But we began working with June a while ago on sort of developing a new idea for an oven, and an oven that's smart, and an oven that actually helps you be a better cook. And this is it, the June oven.
This is the June Intelligent Oven. It's a computer that cooks, and toasts, and bakes, and roasts, and broils. The moment you put in your food, June starts to pay attention. Overhead LED lights show you exactly how good your food looks, and the built-in camera can actually recognize what you're cooking. Now you can start cooking like the pros. Let's take something you've made 1,000,000 times and make it better. See this probe? It knows when this chicken reaches a very specific core temperature. Once it does, June turns up the heat. The outside is crispy, and the inside stays nice and juicy. But what if you're at a loss for what to make? Happens to me all the time. You get access to tons of delicious recipes, each handcrafted for the June oven. It automatically recognizes the most common things we cook. The more June users there are, the better it gets. There are plenty of ways to make food. With June, you make food better.
So I mentioned the video. It has scales in the feet. It has a camera and image recognition. It has temperature monitoring, both internally and externally to the food, and puts that all together with a database and helps you cook and recognizes what you're cooking. And as she mentioned, over time, that library will grow the more people use the product. And it takes some of the aspects of cooking and making good food off a person's hands and into the oven. And again, especially for people that aren't comfortable cooking, it's great, but I contend even people like me that love to cook, it's like computer-aided design. When I first started using those tools, it didn't make me do less design, it actually allowed me to focus on other things, and I think this idea is along those lines. Again, it can tell you remotely what's going on with your meal, you can take a look at it, you don't have to stress and run into the kitchen and check on the chicken all the time, and it's big enough to cook a meal, right? It's bigger than a standard tabletop oven, and we sized it to be able to cook a reasonable meal. But we also had to make it a really great oven, right? So when you look at, it's incredibly well detailed. It's very easy to clean and maintain. It's cool to the touch on all surfaces, especially the front where you have a touch screen, which presented a technical issue of how you actually integrate what is essentially a smartphone into something that gets up to 500 degrees, which all worked out. But most importantly, when we started this, when we started this with Matt Van Horn and Nikhil Bogal, we said, what is this thing? We could make it anything. It could be spherical. It could be hovering off the table, right? What is it? And we all came to know it needs to be an oven, right? It needs to look like an oven, work like an oven, understood as an oven, but be an incredibly good oven, and a beautiful oven at that. And so, that's one of my points in this, is that really, in the reinvention of everyday things, we need to think about what people understand and how it fits into their lives and make sure it does that. So I'm going to finish up with a few quick thoughts on what we've learned through this process. The first one is sort of very broad, but I think it's very important, and I think it's something that many companies today are understanding about design and the type of design that we do, is that while technology is incredibly important and enables all kinds of wonderful things, it's the design of it that establishes it in people's lives, right? It doesn't matter how amazing it is and what it can do if people don't get it, don't want it, won't accept it, et cetera, et cetera. So really, it's about establishing things. When you're developing these kind of things, there's a tendency to overpopulate the product with all kinds of functionality, right? If it's got a processor, it's got a screen, it's connected, why can't I get my email on it, right? No, you really have to stay very focused and really seek this sort of purity of purpose and what it does and expand on the ideas that people have of these well-established things, right? The toaster has been around for a long time. You really need to build on that understanding and keep very focused on it. This is one that would seem obvious, but you'd be surprised, in all the pitches we see that people don't pay attention to this. If you're redesigning an everyday thing, make it a better thing, right? Make it do something that really enhances what it is in people's lives. And what we see a lot is, no, it's just kind of cool, and it can do these new things, and I can look at it on my phone. And I always ask, do I really need a connected can opener, right? That automatically opens the can and tells me what's inside and sends me a text when it's done, right? But we see stuff like that. Don't ask people to do too much. And again, I think this is a real common flaw in development in general, is we sit there and say, if we could just get people to do this and get people to do that, they would really love it, right? Not going to happen. People do not move beyond very much what they know and understand. So try not to ask them to do too much. Last thing, and this is something that was an epiphany for me, that all of a sudden I found myself, art school graduate, spending time with data scientists, right? Now, what is going on here? And that's because, the relationship between user experience and how a product collects data, how it's understood, analyzed, and then returned in functionality is a very important path when you're creating these things, to really understand it. And it's starting with the experience and ending back in the experience. And so as we're working these products, we find with a lot of people are sort of really ignoring the back end, like, oh yeah, we'll figure that out, right? No, you need to be working very closely from the beginning. So with that, one last thing I always say, if it was easy, everybody would do it. Doing great design that's beautiful, works well, fits in people's lives, and it's desirable is a tough task. It takes time, commitment, and money, but it's worth it. And with that, I'm done. Thank you very much.